After a devastating storm, a solitary ranger rescues two abandoned animals, a wounded bobcat kitten and a German shepherd. Their extraordinary bond challenges nature itself and forces him to make an impossible choice. Subscribe and comment where you're watching from. The Appalachian skies darkened to an ominous violet as Jack Harmon secured the shutters of his log cabin. At 62, the retired forest ranger's weathered face bore the deep lines of a man who had spent decades beneath the sun and stars. His calloused hands worked methodically, preparing for what the Weather Service had called the storm of the decade. "Come on, old girl," he muttered to the approaching thunderheads. "Let's see what you've got." The first drops hit like bullets on the metal roof as Jack lit the kerosene lamp in his living room. Electricity was a luxury that often abandoned this remote stretch of the Blue Ridge during storms. The cabin, built with his own hands 15 years ago, stood as a testament to his self-reliance, a trait that had outlasted his marriage. "Should have listened to Sarah," he admitted to the empty room, thinking of his ex-wife who had begged him to move closer to Asheville. "Too much isolation isn't good for anyone," she'd said before packing her suitcase 3 years ago. The wind howled like a wounded animal, rattling the windows in their frames. Jack added another log to the wood stove and settled into his armchair, a dog-eared copy of Thoreau in his lap, companionship found in the words of another man who had sought solitude. Sleep came fitfully as nature unleashed its fury. Sometime after midnight, a tremendous crack jolted him awake, the distinctive sound of wood splintering under force. Jack grabbed his flashlight but stayed put. Only a fool would venture out in such chaos. Dawn broke with eerie silence. Jack stepped onto his porch, surveying the devastation. Ancient oaks lay toppled, and debris scattered across his property like discarded toys. The access road was completely blocked by fallen trees. "Jesus Christ," he whispered, running a hand through his silver hair. A faint sound, barely audible, caught his attention. Following it to a twisted mass of branches, Jack discovered a pitiful sight. A tiny bobcat kitten, no more than 2 months old, its hind leg bleeding and eyes swollen shut. "Your mama nearby, little one?" Jack scanned the surroundings, knowing a mother bobcat wouldn't abandon her young without reason. The absence of an adult suggested the worst. As he contemplated the kitten's fate, another sound emerged from the direction of the guest cabin, a structure he rented to vacationers seeking mountain solitude. A sharp, desperate bark echoed through the trees. Inside the partially damaged cabin, Jack found a young German shepherd, trembling beneath a table. A hasty note on the counter told the story. "Had to evacuate. We'll call about the dog. Sorry, abandoned twice over," Jack muttered, looking between the frightened dog and the wounded bobcat kitten he'd wrapped in his jacket. "What am I supposed to do with you two?" The dog, a handsome yearling with intelligent eyes, approached cautiously, sniffing at the bundle in Jack's arms. "Easy now," Jack warned, though the dog showed only curiosity, not aggression. Back in his cabin, Jack located his old veterinary field guide. As a ranger, he performed basic first aid on wildlife, but this situation demanded more expertise. "Dr. Morgan's not going to like this," he said, referring to Elena Morgan, the only veterinarian within 30 miles. A woman whose passionate lectures about wildlife rehabilitation protocols he'd endured before. Jack looked at the two creatures, one wild, one domestic, both victims of circumstance. Something stirred in him, a feeling he'd thought long buried beneath years of chosen solitude. "Just until you heal," he told the bobcat kitten, already knowing his words were a lie. The German shepherd whined softly, as if understanding the significance of this moment. When Jack Harmon's carefully constructed isolation began its inevitable collapse. Outside, the devastated forest mirrored Jack's internal landscape, broken, altered, yet somehow poised for a rebirth he couldn't yet imagine. The veterinary clinic in Pinetop was a converted Victorian house, its white paint peeling at the edges like old bandages. Dr. Elena Morgan tucked a strand of auburn hair behind her ear as she examined the bobcat kitten, her green eyes narrowing with professional scrutiny. "You realize this is a federally protected species, Jack," she said, not looking up from her examination. "And not a stray cat you can just adopt on a whim." Jack shifted uncomfortably, his 6-foot frame seeming too large for the examination room. "I'm well aware what a lynx rufus looks like, Elena," I was a ranger for 32 years. Then you should know better. She gently cleaned the kitten's wounded leg. She's about 8 weeks old. The fact that she's alive is remarkable. Bobcat mothers don't abandon their young unless they can't return, Jack finished. I searched the area, found tracks leading to the creek that flooded. Mother probably got swept away. Elena's expression softened momentarily before hardening again. This doesn't change the legalities. I should be calling Fish and Wildlife right now. The German Shepherd, who'd been waiting patiently by Jack's feet, whined softly. And what's your story with this one? Elena asked, gesturing to the dog. Vacationers left him behind during the evacuation. Name's Diesel according to his tags. Owners haven't called yet. Elena finished bandaging the kitten, which she'd sedated for the examination. So you've decided to take in 2 abandoned animals in the space of 24 hours? This isn't like you, Jack. Maybe I'm tired of my own company, he muttered. A knowing look crossed her face. Sarah called me last month. She's worried about you. Jack's jaw tightened. My ex-wife lost her right to worry about me when she decided Asheville's social scene was more interesting than our marriage. That's not fair and you know it. Elena countered, her voice firm but gentle. You chose isolation. Sarah chose community. Neither of you is wrong, just different. The examination room fell silent except for the soft beeping of medical equipment and Diesel's occasional sighs. What's your plan for them? Elena finally asked. Jack looked at the sedated kitten, so small and vulnerable. The dog needs a home until the owners call. The bobcat needs care until she can be released. Jack Harmon, wildlife rehabilitator, Elena said with skeptical emphasis. You've never shown interest in rehabilitation before. People change, he said simply. Not you. You're the most stubborn man in 3 counties. She handed him a list. If, and that's a big if, I don't report this, you'll need these supplies. The kitten needs specialized formula, and you'll need to feed her every 4 hours, including through the night. Jack took the list without comment. And Jack, Elena's tone turned serious. A bobcat isn't a pet. This is a wild predator. If you're doing this because you're lonely, get a goldfish instead. Outside the clinic, Main Street bustled with post-storm activity. Chainsaws buzzed in the distance as cleanup crews tackled fallen trees. Tourists mingled with locals, all discussing the storm's destruction with that peculiar mix of horror and excitement that natural disasters tend to evoke. Mayor Ronald Peterson spotted Jack loading supplies into his truck and hurried over, his round face flushed with exertion beneath his comb-over. Jack, just the man I wanted to see, he called out, his politician smile firmly in place. Heard you've got yourself a bobcat situation. Jack groaned inwardly. News travels fast. Small town, Peterson shrugged. Listen, I've been thinking. That bobcat could be an opportunity for Pinetop. We've been trying to boost our ecotourism angle, and a rehabilitation story could. It's not a story, Ron. It's a wounded animal. Of course. The mayor backpedaled smoothly. But people love this kind of thing. Man raises bobcat and dog together in harmony. That's headline material. Jack's eyes narrowed. She's going back to the wild once she's healed. Sure. Peterson nodded too enthusiastically. But in the meantime, it's nobody's business but mine. Jack closed his truck door with finality, Diesel already settled in the passenger seat. The sedated kitten rested in a carrier on his lap. As Jack drove away, he caught Elena watching from the clinic doorway, her expression a complex mixture of concern and something else he couldn't quite identify. That night, as Jack prepared the first of many formula feedings, he looked at the tiny bobcat swaddled in a towel and whispered, "What should I call you, little one?" The kitten's uninjured eye opened, a startling amber that seemed to glow in the cabin's dim light. Ember, he decided. I'll call you Ember. Diesel approached cautiously, sniffing at the bundle in Jack's hands. To Jack's surprise, the dog didn't growl or bark, but instead lay down beside Jack's chair, as if standing guard. "Looks like you've got a protector," Jack told Ember. "God knows what I've gotten myself into." Outside, the mountain night wrapped around the cabin like a blanket, stars emerging one by one above the damaged forest, silent witnesses to the beginning of something none of them yet understood. By mid-October, the mountains had transformed into a blazing tapestry of crimson and gold. 3 months had passed since the storm, and life at Jack's cabin had settled into an unexpected rhythm. Ember had grown from a fragile kitten into a sleek juvenile bobcat, her injured leg healing with barely a limp. Diesel's owners had never called, their vacation home now listed for sale after the storm damage, leaving the German Shepherd as Jack's permanent companion. The morning light filtered through the trees as Jack split firewood in the yard. Diesel lounged nearby, watching alertly as Ember practiced pouncing on fallen leaves from the edge of the clearing. "She's getting stronger," Jack called to Diesel. "More wild every day." The phone rang inside the cabin, a rare occurrence that still made Jack flinch. He wiped his brow with a bandana and headed inside, axe propped against the chopping block. "Harmon," he answered gruffly. "Jack, it's Elena." The veterinarian's voice sounded tense. "We need to talk. I'm coming up this afternoon." "What's wrong?" "Someone posted videos of Ember and Diesel playing in your yard on social media. They've gone viral." Jack's stomach tightened. "What videos?" "Who's been on my property?" "Hikers on the Ridge Trail, apparently. They had telephoto lenses." Elena sighed. "I'll explain when I get there. Just be prepared. This might get complicated." When Elena's Jeep bounced up the rutted driveway hours later, Jack was waiting on the porch, arms crossed. Ember and Diesel were inside, a precaution Jack had started taking whenever visitors approached. Elena climbed out, looking unusually formal in pressed khakis and a button-down shirt rather than her typical clinic scrubs. She wasn't alone. A tall man in a Fish and Wildlife Service uniform followed her. "Jack," Elena began carefully. "This is Ranger Mark Townsend from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. He's here about Ember." The men exchanged tense handshakes. "Mr. Harmon," Townsend said, his tone professionally neutral. "I understand you've been rehabilitating a bobcat without proper permits." Jack's jaw tightened. "I've been caring for an injured animal that would have died otherwise." "Admirable," Townsend conceded, "but illegal without rehabilitation certification." Elena stepped between them. Mark agreed to come assess the situation before making any official decisions. "I vouch for you, Jack." Inside, Townsend observed the setup Jack had created, a secure enclosure that allowed Ember to move between the cabin and a protected outdoor space, appropriate feeding stations, and environmental enrichment that Elena had recommended. "I've followed every guideline in the rehabilitation manual," Jack insisted. "Elena's been supervising her care." Unofficially, Elena clarified, shooting Jack a warning glance. Townsend made notes on a tablet. "The videos show concerning behavior. The bobcat appears to be socialized with the dog, playing, even sleeping together. This complicates potential release. They bonded during recovery," Jack explained. "I haven't encouraged it." "Haven't discouraged it either," Elena muttered. As if on cue, Ember emerged from her hiding place under the couch, Diesel following protectively. The bobcat, now the size of a small house cat, but with distinctive tufted ears and spotted coat, assessed the visitors with wary amber eyes. Townsend stiffened. "That animal should be in a proper enclosure when strangers are present." "We're in her enclosure," Jack countered, "and she decides where she feels safe." They watched as Ember circled the room, keeping her distance from the visitors, but showing none of the fear a wild bobcat would display. More surprisingly, she periodically returned to Diesel for reassurance, the German Shepherd remaining calm and attentive. "I've never seen anything like this," Townsend admitted. "Their interaction is unusual." "It's extraordinary," Elena corrected. "They communicate with each other. Watch." As if demonstrating, Diesel gave a soft whine. Ember immediately retreated to a higher perch on Jack's bookshelf, her eyes never leaving the strangers. "They've developed their own system," Jack explained. "Diesel alerts when he senses danger, and Ember reacts accordingly." Townsend frowned. "This level of domestication significantly reduces her chances for successful release." "She's not domesticated," Jack insisted. "She's habituated to specific circumstances. There's a difference. A difference that matters to scientists, perhaps, but not to predators or prey in the wild," Townsend replied. "She wouldn't survive a week." Elena cleared her throat. "Mark, what options are we looking at?" Townsend put away his tablet. "By the book, we should transfer her to a licensed rehabilitation center with proper facilities for minimizing human contact." Jack's hands clenched into fists. "After everything, however," Townsend continued, "relocating her now could cause significant stress. And the relationship with the dog is scientifically interesting." Hope flickered in Jack's chest. I'll need to consult with my superiors, but there might be a compromise, Townsend explained. A temporary permit allowing Mr. Harmon to continue care under strict supervision, with regular assessments of the bobcat's rehabilitation progress. After Townsend and Elena left, Jack sat on the porch steps, watching the sunset paint the mountains. Diesel pressed against his side, while Ember observed from the railing, just out of reach, close but independent. They want to take you away, Jack told the bobcat softly. And damn it if I haven't gone and gotten attached. Ember's ears twitched at his voice, her amber eyes reflecting the dying light. Always told myself I was better off alone after Sarah left, Jack continued. No attachments, no disappointments. Then you two showed up. Diesel whined softly, pushing his head under Jack's hand. Yeah, I know, Jack scratched behind the dog's ears. Stubborn old fool, that's what Elena calls me. Maybe she's right. As darkness settled over the mountains, Jack made a decision. He would fight to keep them together. This unlikely family forged in the aftermath of destruction. Whatever it took. The November chill settled into the Appalachians like an unwelcome guest, bringing frost-covered mornings and the scent of wood smoke that hung in the valleys. Inside Jack's cabin, the warmth of the wood stove created a comfortable haven where Ember had claimed the back of an old leather armchair as her personal throne, while Diesel sprawled on the braided rug below. Jack's phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. Elena's name flashed on the screen. They've made a decision, she said without preamble. Mark's bringing the paperwork tomorrow. You're getting a provisional rehabilitation permit. Relief flooded through Jack. What changed their minds? The videos helped, ironically enough, Elena explained. A wildlife behaviorist from NC State saw them and contacted the department. She's interested in studying Ember and Diesel's relationship. Apparently, it's unprecedented, at least in documented cases. So I'm trading one problem for another, Jack grumbled. Now I'll have scientists crawling around my property. It's Dr. Abigail Chun or a transfer to a rehabilitation center, Elena said firmly. Those are your options, Jack. And before you start complaining, remember that I stuck my neck out for you. Jack sighed, watching Ember groom herself with meticulous care. What time tomorrow? 10. And Jack, wear something presentable. This is official. The next morning, Jack found himself in the unusual position of hosting a small delegation in his cabin. Ranger Townsend arrived with the promised paperwork. Dr. Chun, a compact woman with keen eyes and quick movements, immediately began setting up recording equipment. Elena completed the group, her presence a surprising comfort to Jack amid the bureaucratic invasion. The permit comes with conditions, Townsend explained, spreading forms across Jack's kitchen table. Weekly documentation of the bobcat's development, restricted visitor access, regular veterinary checkups, and participation in my behavioral study, Dr. Chen added. I'll need to install motion-activated cameras in key areas and visit bi-weekly for direct observation. Jack frowned. My cabin isn't a research facility. It is now, Elena said quietly, placing a hand on his arm. It's this or nothing, Jack. As they discussed terms, a truck rumbled up the driveway. Through the window, Jack recognized Mayor Peterson's vehicle. What's he doing here? Jack muttered. Peterson burst through the door without knocking, his smile wide beneath his meticulously combed hair. Jack heard the good news from County. Provisional permit approved. His gaze landed on the assembled group. Perfect timing. We've got some fantastic opportunities to discuss. This is a closed meeting, Townsend said firmly. Peterson's smile didn't falter. Just need 5 minutes of Jack's time. Town business. He gestured toward the porch. Reluctantly, Jack followed him outside. Tourism board met yesterday. Peterson began without preamble. We're launching a new campaign. Pinetop, where nature finds harmony. Your story is the centerpiece. Jack's expression darkened. I never agreed to that. The whole town's talking about it already. The ranger, the bobcat, and the dog. It writes itself. Peterson pulled out a glossy mock-up of a brochure featuring poorly photoshopped images of bobcats and German shepherds against Appalachian vistas. We're expecting a 30% increase in visitors by spring. No, Jack said flatly. I won't be part of your tourism scheme. Peterson's jovial facade cracked slightly. Be reasonable, Jack. This isn't just about tourism. It's about the town's survival. The sawmill's closing next month. The storm damage set us back thousands. We need this. Find another gimmick. It's not a gimmick. Peterson's voice rose. It's a legitimate cultural attraction. The Winter Festival Committee wants you to bring Ember for the lighting ceremony next month. Jack laughed incredulously. You want me to bring a wild predator to a crowded public event? Absolutely not. Inside, the others had fallen silent, clearly listening. Jack, Peterson's voice dropped to a near whisper. The county assessor's office is reviewing property tax rates for remote cabins. Your 5 acres could see a significant increase, unless there's a reason to classify it differently. Say, as a wildlife educational property. Jack's eyes narrowed. Are you threatening me? Offering solutions, Peterson corrected smoothly. Think about it. After everyone left, Jack sat at his kitchen table, staring at the signed permits and forms. Ember jumped lightly onto the table, sniffing at the papers. Off the table, Jack said automatically, though without conviction. Diesel whined from his spot by the door, clearly wanting a walk. Yeah, I know, Jack told the dog. Everything's changing, and I never asked for any of it. He pulled on his jacket and whistled for Diesel. To his surprise, Ember trotted after them to the door. You want to come too? Jack asked the bobcat. In answer, Ember slipped through the door Diesel had nudged open with his nose. Their walk took them to the ridge overlooking the valley, where Pinetop's lights were beginning to twinkle in the early dusk. Ember stayed close, occasionally disappearing into underbrush only to reappear moments later. Her movements were becoming more confident, more predatory, a reminder of her true nature. You belong out here, Jack told her softly. Not in tourism brochures or research papers. That night, Elena called again. I heard about Peterson's visit, she said. Mark was furious. Peterson's all talk, Jack said, though uncertainty crept into his voice. Maybe, Elena paused. Jack, I'm worried. This is getting complicated. Tell me something I don't know. The town's divided. Some folks think you're doing something special up there. Others are saying it's dangerous, unnatural. Jack glanced at Ember, curled up asleep against Diesel's flank. What do you think? The line went quiet for a moment. Then, so softly he almost missed it, Elena said, I think you're not as alone as you want everyone to believe. After they hung up, Jack watched his unlikely family sleeping peacefully together. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to acknowledge the truth in Elena's words, and the unsettling question of what would happen when Ember inevitably grew into her wild nature. December arrived with the first heavy snowfall, transforming the mountains into a pristine wonderland. Inside Jack's cabin, the holidays were marked by subtle changes. A small pine tree in the corner, adorned with simple wooden ornaments Jack had carved years ago, and the unexpected delivery of homemade cookies from Elena. Ember, now nearly 6 months old and growing rapidly, had developed a fascination with the snow. Jack watched through the window as she pounced on drifts, her tawny coat stark against the white landscape. Diesel followed patiently, occasionally joining her play, but mostly standing guard. She's getting bigger, Jack remarked to Dr. Chun, who sat at his kitchen table reviewing footage from her cameras. Stronger, too. Her hunting instincts are developing right on schedule, Chun confirmed, not looking up from her laptop. Yesterday's footage shows her successfully stalking and catching a squirrel. Diesel didn't interfere, which is remarkable. Jack's chest tightened with conflicting emotions, pride in Ember's natural development and concern about what it meant for their future. The way they communicate is unprecedented, Chun continued, turning the laptop so Jack could see. The screen showed Ember and Diesel moving through the forest together, using subtle signals, ear movements, tail positions, to coordinate their movements. They're developing a collaborative hunting strategy. In the wild, canids and felids are competitors, not collaborators. They don't know they're supposed to be enemies, Jack said simply. Exactly, Chen's eyes lit with academic excitement. It's nurture overriding nature. My colleagues are skeptical, but the footage doesn't lie. The sound of tires on the snowy driveway interrupted them. Jack glanced out to see Elena's Jeep pulling up, followed by an unfamiliar SUV with fish and wildlife markings. Were we expecting Townsend today? Jack asked. Chen frowned. No, our scheduled check-in isn't until next week. Jack whistled for Diesel and Ember, who reluctantly abandoned their snow play and trotted inside. Jack had installed a special door that allowed them to come and go freely into a secured portion of the yard, another compromise with the authorities. Elena entered first, stamping snow from her boots. Her face was tight with worry. "Jack, this is Regional Director Patricia Wilcox. She's here about the permit situation." Director Wilcox, a tall woman with silver-streaked hair and a no-nonsense demeanor, extended her hand. "Mr. Harmon, we have some concerns to address." Jack led them to the living room, where Ember had retreated to her favorite high perch on a specially built shelf. Diesel settled protectively at the foot of it. "I'll be direct," Wilcox began. "The publicity surrounding your arrangement has created complications. We've received formal complaints from conservation groups concerned about improper rehabilitation practices." "What complaints?" Jack demanded. "I've followed every guideline." "The guidelines don't account for what you're doing here," Wilcox replied. "The intentional socialization between a wild predator and a domestic dog falls outside our protocols." "It wasn't intentional," Jack protested. "It developed naturally during Ember's recovery." "Nevertheless," Wilcox continued, "we're concerned about the message it sends. The viral videos have garnered millions of views. People see something heartwarming and might attempt to replicate it with wildlife." Dr. Chin spoke up. "Director Wilcox, my research documents significant scientific value in studying this unique relationship. Terminating it prematurely would. Science isn't my only consideration, Doctor," Wilcox interrupted. "Public safety and wildlife welfare take precedence." Elena leaned forward. "What exactly are you proposing?" Wilcox pulled out a folder. "Two options. First, we transfer the bobcat to our rehabilitation facility in Asheville, where contact with humans and domestic animals will be minimized to prepare for eventual release." Jack's hands clenched. "And the second option? We reclassify your property as an official satellite rehabilitation center, subject to strict regulations and regular inspections. You would need to complete formal certification training, install proper containment facilities, and eliminate all unnecessary interaction between the bobcat and your dog." She glanced pointedly at Diesel. "It would require significant investment on your part." "How significant?" Jack asked. Wilcox named a figure that made Jack wince. On his forest ranger's pension, it was beyond reach. "I need your decision by January 15th, Wilcox concluded, rising to leave. "I understand your attachment, Mr. Harmon, but bobcats aren't pets. They belong in the wild." After Wilcox departed, Elena and Chun remained, the atmosphere heavy with unspoken concerns. "I can't afford what she's asking," Jack finally said. "The university might provide research funding," Chun offered. Given the scientific significance, with strings attached, Jack cut in. "More cameras, more researchers, more invasion of privacy." Elena's voice was gentle but firm. "Jack, you need to be realistic. Ember is growing. Her adult instincts are developing. What's your long-term plan?" "I don't know," he admitted, the words painful in his throat. Later that evening, after everyone had gone, Jack sat on the porch despite the cold, watching darkness settle over the snow-covered mountains. Diesel pushed through the door to join him, followed by Ember, who kept her distance but stayed within sight. "What am I supposed to do?" Jack asked them, his breath clouding in the frigid air. "Let them take you away? Turn this place into some kind of zoo?" His phone rang, Mayor Peterson again. Jack had been dodging his calls for weeks. With a resigned sigh, he answered, "Jack, glad I caught you." Peterson's voice was irritatingly cheerful. "We need to confirm arrangements for the winter festival." "The committee, I'm not bringing Ember to your festival," Jack interrupted. "Now, Jack, be reasonable. The whole town's expecting it. The promotional materials are already printed." "Without my permission," Jack reminded him. Peterson's tone hardened. "I heard about Wilcox's visit. Sounds like you're in a tight spot financially. You offering to pay for the rehabilitation center upgrades?" Jack asked sarcastically. "Better. The town council approved a proposal. We'll fund the improvements if you agree to limited public viewing hours, just 2 days a month. Educational purposes only." The offer was tempting, a solution to his financial dilemma. But Jack knew what it really meant. Turning his sanctuary into a tourist attraction, with Ember as the main exhibit. "I need time to think," he said finally. After hanging up, Jack went inside where Elena was preparing to leave. She'd stayed behind after Chen's departure, helping Jack research options online. Peterson offered to pay for the upgrades, he told her, in exchange for public access. Elena zipped her coat. "And what does Jack Harmon, the man who values his solitude above all else, think about that idea?" I hate it, he admitted. But I hate the thought of losing Ember more. Elena stepped closer, her expression softening. You know, for someone who claims to want to be alone, you've created quite a family here. Jack didn't answer, but he didn't move away either when Elena hesitantly placed her hand on his arm. Whatever you decide, she said quietly, you don't have to do it alone. After she left, Jack watched Ember and Diesel sleeping near the wood stove. For creatures supposedly destined to be enemies, they'd found rare harmony. Meanwhile, Jack found himself increasingly tangled in human complications he'd once fled to the mountains to escape. January brought bitter cold and clarity in equal measure. The winter festival came and went without Ember's appearance, much to Mayor Peterson's disappointment. Jack had refused all offers, withdrawing further into his isolated routine as the decision deadline approached. 6 months after the storm, Ember had grown remarkably. No longer a kitten, she displayed the powerful build and distinctive features of an adolescent bobcat. Her hunting skills developed daily, and she frequently brought gifts, mostly mice and voles, to the cabin's doorstep. One morning, Jack sipped coffee at his kitchen table, scanning the formal notification from Fish and Wildlife once more. Tomorrow was the deadline for his decision. A knock at the door startled him. Elena entered without waiting for an invitation, stomping snow from her boots. You're avoiding me, she accused, unwinding a thick scarf from around her neck. Been busy, Jack muttered. Elena set a folder on the table. I've been busy too. These are grant applications, fundraising proposals, and community support petitions. She tapped the folder emphatically. Options, Jack? Because you've been too stubborn to return calls. I don't need charity. It's not charity. Elena snapped, her patience clearly frayed. It's people trying to help because they care about what happens to you and Ember. She paused, then added more gently. And Diesel, of course. As if hearing his name, the German shepherd padded into the kitchen, greeting Elena with a friendly nudge. Ember followed, keeping a cautious distance but showing none of her earlier wariness around Elena. She's getting more comfortable with me, Elena observed. With everyone, Jack confirmed. That's part of the problem. Have you made your decision? Elena asked. Jack stared into his coffee. I can't give them what they want. The rehabilitation center requirements are beyond my means, even with Peterson's offer. He looked up at Elena, his expression raw with an emotion he rarely allowed himself to show. But I can't bear the thought of them taking her. Elena sat across from him. There's another option we haven't discussed. I'm listening. Dr. Chen approached me about establishing a proper wildlife research station here. Not a tourist attraction, she clarified, seeing Jack's expression darken. A legitimate, university-backed facility focused on interspecies behavior. They'd fund all the necessary upgrades to meet fish and wildlife requirements. And turn my home into a laboratory, Jack added skeptically. They'd build a separate facility on your property. You'd maintain ownership and privacy. Elena leaned forward. Jack, this could work. The university has influence with state agencies. They're offering a salary, too, as a resident wildlife manager. Jack's eyebrows rose. They want to pay me to do what I'm already doing? To do it officially, Elena corrected. With proper documentation, protocols, and occasional student observers. Jack stood abruptly, walking to the window. Outside, snow fell in thick flakes, cloaking the world in white silence. I came to these mountains to get away from committees and protocols. I know, Elena said softly. But circumstances change. People change. Jack turned to face her. Do they? Because I'm still that same stubborn old ranger who can't stand bureaucracy. Are you? Elena challenged. The Jack Harmon I first met would never have taken in a wounded bobcat and a stray dog. He wouldn't have fought so hard to keep them. She gestured around the cabin, at the adaptations Jack had made for his unusual family. The climbing shelves for Ember, the reinforced door allowing outdoor access, the carefully labeled medication chart on the refrigerator. This doesn't look like the home of someone who wants to be left completely alone. Before Jack could respond, his phone rang. The screen showed Dr. Chen's number. Jack, Chen's voice was urgent. Is Ember inside with you? A cold weight settled in Jack's stomach. She was here a minute ago. What? The motion sensors picked up unusual activity at the edge of your property. There are vehicles, people with cameras. Jack cursed, scanning the room. Diesel was still there, but Ember had vanished. Elena's here. We'll find her, Jack said, already reaching for his coat. Outside, they spotted fresh tracks in the snow leading toward the forest edge. Diesel immediately picked up the scent, straining at his leash. Someone must have trespassed past the property markers, Jack muttered, following Diesel into the trees. Probably trying to get footage for those damn social media accounts. They hadn't gone far when they heard voices, several people talking excitedly. Rounding a large pine, Jack came upon 3 young men with professional camera equipment, crouched near a fallen log. One was extending a selfie stick with meat attached towards something Jack couldn't see. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Jack demanded. The men jumped, startled. The youngest, barely out of his teens, spoke first. "Hey, you're the Bobcat guy? We're from Wildlife Chronicles. Our followers would go crazy for an exclusive with, 'You're trespassing.'" Jack cut him off. "This is private property. The access road is public land," argued another, a bearded man in an expensive-looking parka. "We're just trying to get some footage. Maybe an interview." Elena stepped forward. "The Bobcat is protected under federal regulations. Attempting to lure or bait her is illegal." The third man, who had been silent, suddenly pointed. "There she is." Jack turned to see Ember perched on a boulder several yards away, her amber eyes fixed on the strangers. She looked magnificent and fully wild in that moment, tufted ears alert, muscles tensed beneath her spotted coat. "Don't move," Jack warned everyone, but the damage was done. The bearded man raised his camera, the movement too quick, too threatening. Ember hissed, a sound Jack had rarely heard from her, and in a blur of motion, she was gone, deeper into the forest. "Now look what you've done," Jack growled, advancing on the intruders. "Get off my property." Now, the men retreated, mumbling apologies mixed with requests for interviews that Jack ignored. Elena called Dr. Chun to report the incident while Jack and Diesel searched the surrounding forest, calling for Ember. Hours passed with no sign of her. As darkness fell, Jack reluctantly returned to the cabin, leaving the secure outdoor enclosure open in hopes she would return during the night. "She'll come back," Elena assured him, preparing to leave. "This is her home, is it?" Jack asked quietly. "Or have I just been pretending it could be?" Elena touched his arm. "Get some rest. I'll come back tomorrow to help search." But Jack didn't rest. He sat on the porch all night despite the bitter cold, Diesel a warm presence beside him, both watching the darkness for any sign of movement. The decision deadline loomed like a physical presence, made more complicated by Ember's disappearance. As dawn broke over the mountains, painting the snow in pink and gold, Jack made his choice. He would accept the university's offer, not for himself, but for Ember. If, when, she returned, he would ensure she had the best possible life, whatever form that needed to take. He was about to go inside when Diesel suddenly stood alert, ears forward. A moment later, Jack spotted movement at the forest edge. Ember emerged from the trees, her coat dusted with snow, moving with the fluid grace of a wild predator. She paused at the yard's edge, watching Jack with those unblinking amber eyes. "It's your choice," Jack told her softly. "Come back or stay wild. I'll understand either way." For a long, breathless moment, he thought she would turn and disappear forever. Then, with deliberate steps, Ember crossed the yard and slipped through the special door into the cabin. Jack followed, finding her in her usual spot on the high shelf. She seemed different somehow, more distant, more wild, yet she had chosen to return. "Okay then," Jack said, his voice rough with emotion. "We'll find a way forward. Together." By early April, the transformation of Jack's property was well underway. The university had wasted no time once agreements were signed, constructing a modest research facility 100 yards from his cabin. The building, designed to blend with the forest surroundings, housed monitoring equipment, a small laboratory, and accommodation for visiting researchers. Jack stood on his porch, watching 2 graduate students setting up cameras along the newly established observation corridor. Dr. Chen supervised nearby, her enthusiasm for the project undiminished despite the challenges of the past months. Ember, now nearly full-grown, observed the activity from a distance. At 10 months old, she displayed all the physical characteristics of an adult female bobcat: muscular build, distinctive facial ruffs, and the confidence of a capable predator. Her behavior had shifted subtly since her overnight disappearance in January. She spent more time outdoors, occasionally vanishing for hours before returning to the cabin. She's asserting her independence, Dr. Chun had explained. It's a natural developmental stage. Diesel remained Ember's steadfast companion, though their relationship had evolved. The German Shepherd no longer followed protectively, but moved as a partner, their coordinated hunting becoming the focal point of Chin's research. Jack! Elena's voice pulled him from his thoughts. She approached from the driveway, carrying a box of supplies. The antibiotics for Diesel arrived. His joint inflammation should improve within a few days. At 2.5 years old, Diesel had developed early signs of hip dysplasia, a common issue in German Shepherds. The condition didn't stop him from accompanying Ember on their explorations, but Jack had noticed the stiffness in the dog's movements after particularly active days. "Thanks," Jack said, taking the box. He hesitated, then added, "Stay for dinner? I've got venison stew." Elena smiled, a genuine expression that softened her typically practical demeanor. Is that Jack Harmon actually extending a social invitation? "Don't make me regret it," he grumbled, though without heat. Their relationship had shifted during the past months, moving cautiously from professional association to something resembling friendship. Elena had become a regular visitor, not just for Ember's checkups, but often staying for coffee or bringing books she thought Jack might enjoy. Inside the cabin, Jack set about preparing dinner while Elena unpacked medical supplies. The interior had changed significantly, partly due to fish and wildlife requirements, and partly due to Jack's own evolving needs. Educational materials lined one wall, detailed logs documented Ember's development, and a sophisticated security system monitored the property perimeter. "How's the town handling the changes?" Elena asked, organizing medications in Jack's cabinet. Jack snorted. "Peterson's furious. Called the university partnership a betrayal of community interests. Because you wouldn't turn Ember into a tourist attraction? Because there are restrictions on visitor access," Jack clarified. "The research permit only allows small groups of pre-approved visitors, scientists, students, wildlife officials, not tour buses full of camera-wielding tourists." Elena leaned against the counter. "I heard he's planning some kind of wildlife experience center in town to capitalize on the interest anyway." "Good. Let him focus on that instead of pestering me." Their conversation was interrupted by Diesel scratching at the door. Jack let him in, surprised to see Ember following closely. Usually she used her own entrance. Something in their demeanor seemed different. Both animals appeared unusually alert. "What's got into you two?" Jack asked. Elena frowned, moving toward the window. "Jack, there's someone coming up the drive." A black SUV with government markings was approaching, followed by a vehicle Jack didn't recognize, an expensive-looking sedan with rental plates. "Were you expecting fish and wildlife today?" Elena asked. "No," Jack said, tension creeping into his voice. "No one scheduled until next week." The vehicles parked, and 4 people emerged. Jack recognized Director Wilcox from Fish and Wildlife, accompanied by Ranger Townsend. The others were strangers, a well-dressed woman with a tablet and a man carrying high-end camera equipment. Jack met them at the door before they could knock. "Director Wilcox, this is an unexpected visit." Wilcox's expression was professionally neutral. "Mr. Harmon, we're conducting an unscheduled assessment, part of the permit requirements." "And them?" Jack nodded toward the strangers. "Melissa Jenkins, from the Governor's Conservation Initiative," the woman introduced herself. "And this is David Keller, our media coordinator. We're documenting successful wildlife management partnerships across the state." Jack's eyes narrowed. No one mentioned media coverage in our agreement. "It's standard procedure for grant-funded projects," Jenkins replied smoothly. "The initiative partially funds your university partnership. You should have been notified," Wilcox added, with a pointed look at Townsend. Jack glanced at Elena, who had joined him at the door. Her slight head shake confirmed his suspicion that this was not, in fact, standard procedure. "I'd like to see the documentation authorizing media access," Jack stated firmly. Jenkins tapped at her tablet. "Everything's in order, I assure you. We won't disrupt your operations. Just a few photographs, some background footage for an educational video." Before Jack could respond, movement at the edge of the forest caught everyone's attention. Ember had slipped outside during the conversation and now stood watching the gathering, Diesel at her side. "Perfect timing," the cameraman murmured, raising his equipment. "Don't," Jack warned. Sudden movements will startle her. But the warning came too late. The camera lens extended with a mechanical whir, and Ember instantly tensed. "Lower that camera," Elena ordered. Slowly, the cameraman complied, but Ember had already retreated several steps. Diesel remained in place, his posture protective. "Fascinating," Jenkins remarked, observing the interaction. "The dog really does guard the bobcat." "They guard each other," Jack corrected. "And right now, Diesel is telling us Ember's uncomfortable with your presence." Wilcox stepped forward. "Mr. Harmon, while I understand your concerns, this assessment is non-negotiable. The state has significant investment in this project." Jack crossed his arms. The agreement specified that all visits would be scheduled in advance to minimize stress on the animal. "You're in violation of those terms." A tense silence followed, broken by Elena's intervention. "Perhaps a compromise," she suggested. "Director Wilcox and Ranger Townsend can conduct their assessment as required. Meanwhile, Ms. Jenkins and Mr. Keller can review the existing footage from Dr. Chen's research. It's extensive and professionally shot." Jenkins didn't look pleased, but Wilcox nodded curtly. "That's reasonable. We'll proceed with the assessment first." The inspection took over 2 hours, during which Ember remained conspicuously absent. Diesel stayed close to Jack, occasionally glancing toward the forest where Ember had disappeared. "She's perfectly healthy," Elena assured Wilcox as they reviewed medical records. "All developmental markers are on track. The university research confirms she's maintaining her natural instincts while adapting to her unique circumstances." "The concern," Wilcox replied, "is what happens when those natural instincts fully mature. Territorial behavior, mating drives, they could create unpredictable situations." Jack, who had been listening silently, finally spoke. "You think I haven't considered that? Everything we've done, everything I've built here, is designed to give her choices. She can stay or go, hunt naturally or accept supplemental feeding. That's not how wildlife management typically works, Mr. Harmon." "Nothing about this situation is typical," Jack countered. "That's why the university is here, to document and learn from it." After the visitors finally departed, Jenkins, still visibly frustrated at being denied her photo opportunity, Jack and Elena stood on the porch in the gathering dusk. "This isn't over," Elena said quietly. "Jenkins has the governor's ear, and there's an election coming up. Wildlife conservation makes for good campaign material." Jack nodded grimly. "They'll be back. With more cameras and less patience," Elena agreed. As darkness settled over the mountains, there was still no sign of Ember. Jack tried not to worry. She had stayed out overnight before, but something felt different this time. "She'll come back," Elena said, as if reading his thoughts. "Will she?" Jack asked. "Maybe she shouldn't. Maybe the wild is where she belongs now." Elena's hand found his, her fingers intertwining with his calloused ones. "She belongs where she chooses to belong, Jack, just like the rest of us." The simple truth of her words settled over him as they stood together in the quiet April evening, waiting for a wild creature who had somehow become family. 3 days passed with no sign of Ember. Jack maintained his routines, feeding the monitoring stations, updating logs, meeting with Dr. Chen's research team, but his eyes constantly scanned the forest edge. Diesel grew increasingly restless, whining at the doors and windows, clearly searching for his missing companion. On the 4th morning, Jack woke to the sound of his phone ringing. Elena's name flashed on the screen. "I'm on my way up," she said without preamble. "Fish and Wildlife called. They've received reports of a bobcat sighting in Pinetop." Jack's heart raced. Ember. It matches her description. The notch in her left ear, the slight limp on her right hind leg. She was spotted near Whitaker's general store at dawn. Jack was already pulling on his boots. "Is she hurt?" "No reports of injury, but Jack," Elena hesitated. She approached a child. Ice formed in Jack's stomach. "What happened?" "Nothing dangerous. According to witnesses, she just watched. Kept her distance, but didn't run when the child noticed her. It caused quite a stir." "I'll meet you in town," Jack said, grabbing his keys. Pinetop was buzzing with excitement when Jack arrived. Main Street, typically quiet on weekday mornings, was filled with people carrying cameras and scanning rooftops and alleyways. Jack spotted Mayor Peterson holding court outside the coffee shop, gesturing animatedly to a small crowd. Elena's Jeep pulled up beside Jack's truck. "This isn't good," she said, eyeing the gathering. Word spreads fast in small towns. They found Ranger Townsend outside Whitaker's, speaking with a young mother who held a toddler on her hip. She was right there, the woman was saying, pointing to a storage shed behind the store. My Liam was playing while I unloaded groceries, and this bobcat just appeared. I nearly had a heart attack, but it didn't act aggressive. Just watched him, then disappeared when I called out. Townsend nodded, making notes. And you're certain it had a notch in its ear? Clear as day, the woman confirmed. Is it true it's the one from up at Jack Harmon's place? The one that lives with a dog? Jack stepped forward. Ma'am, when exactly did this happen? The woman turned, recognition flashing across her face. Mr. Harmon, it was about 2 hours ago. Is she yours? The bobcat. She's not a pet, Jack corrected automatically. But yes, I've been rehabilitating her. Well, she didn't seem dangerous, just curious. Liam thought she was a big kitty. The woman bounced her son gently. Still gave me a scare, though. Townsend pulled Jack and Elena aside. We've had multiple sightings since dawn. All non-aggressive, but concerning nonetheless. A federally protected predator approaching humans in a populated area. She's not approaching them, Jack interrupted. She's observing. There's a difference. A distinction lost on the public, Townsend countered. And on fish and wildlife regulations. Elena intervened. What's the plan, Mark? You're not considering trapping her. We're assembling a response team, Townsend admitted. Director Wilcox wants her contained and evaluated before making any decisions. Let me find her, Jack insisted. She knows me, trusts me. If anyone can bring her back safely, it's me and Diesel. Townsend hesitated. Jack, if she's displaying habituation behaviors in town, then I'm the safest option for retrieving her, Jack finished. You know I'm right. After a tense negotiation, Townsend agreed to give Jack 6 hours before implementing official containment protocols. Jack returned to his truck for Diesel, who had been waiting anxiously inside. We need to find her, boy, Jack told the German Shepherd, offering Ember's blanket for scent. Before they do, the search through Pine Top proved frustrating. Too many people were looking for Ember now, creating a carnival atmosphere that would certainly drive her into hiding. Jack avoided the crowds, focusing instead on quieter areas where a bobcat might seek refuge. By mid-afternoon, exhaustion and worry had settled over Jack like a physical weight. He sat on a bench at the town's small park, Diesel resting beside him, both momentarily defeated. Elena found them there, carrying coffee and sandwiches. Any sign? Jack shook his head. Too many people. Too much commotion. Peterson's loving it, Elena said disgustedly. He's organized a bobcat watch, with prizes for the best photo. Called the local news stations too. That's self-serving. Jack stopped mid-sentence as Diesel suddenly lifted his head, ears alert. The German Shepherd rose, nose working the air, then gave a soft whine Jack recognized immediately, the same sound Diesel made when communicating with Ember. He's got something, Jack said, standing quickly. They followed Diesel away from the park, past the busy downtown, toward the old sawmill at the edge of town. The facility, scheduled for closure next month, operated with a skeleton crew now, its once bustling yard quiet and partially overgrown. Diesel led them to a chain-link fence surrounding the property. Beyond it, abandoned equipment rusted among tall weeds. You think she's in there? Elena asked. Jack studied the fence line, spotting a gap near the bottom, just large enough for a bobcat to slip through. Good shelter, minimal human activity. Makes sense. The gate's padlocked, Elena pointed out. And there's probably security. Jack was already pulling wire cutters from his jacket pocket. At Elena's raised eyebrow, he shrugged. Old ranger habit. Never know when you'll need to clear a trail. The snip of metal cutting through chain link seemed impossibly loud in the quiet afternoon. Jack created an opening just large enough to squeeze through, followed by Diesel and Elena. The sawmill yard was a maze of lumber stacks, equipment, and outbuildings. Diesel moved purposefully between them, his training as a companion animal momentarily overshadowed by more primitive instincts. Jack, Elena whispered, pointing. There, atop a stack of lumber, sat Ember. She looked magnificent, fully wild, yet somehow still connected to them, her amber eyes tracking their approach without fear. Hey girl, Jack said softly. You've caused quite a stir. Ember's ears flicked forward at the sound of his voice. For a tense moment, Jack feared she might flee, but then Diesel gave his familiar whine. Ember's posture relaxed slightly. We need to get her home, Elena murmured. Before Townsend's team deploys. Jack nodded, slowly reaching into his pocket for a leatherwork glove. He pulled it on, then extended his gloved hand toward Ember, a gesture they'd practiced during training sessions. It wasn't a command, but an invitation. Ember watched, unmoving. The moment stretched, filled with unspoken communication between man and wild creature. Then, with fluid grace, Ember descended from her perch. She kept a careful distance but didn't run, allowing Jack and Diesel to herd her gradually toward the fence opening. "That's it," Jack encouraged. "Easy now." They had almost reached the fence when a shout rang out. "Hey, this is private property." A security guard appeared from around a building, flashlight in hand despite the daylight. Startled, Ember bolted, not toward the fence opening but deeper into the sawmill yard. "Damn it," Jack muttered. To the approaching guard, he called, "Fish and Wildlife Operation. We're tracking a protected species." The guard hesitated, giving Jack and Elena time to produce their identification, Jack's provisional rehabilitation permit and Elena's veterinary credentials. "There was a bobcat," Elena explained. "We need to recover her before she's injured." The guard, an older man with a weathered face, nodded slowly. "Saw it earlier. Thought I was seeing things." He gestured toward an equipment shed. "Headed that way last I noticed." With the guard's reluctant permission, they continued their pursuit. Diesel led them to the shed, a large, dilapidated structure with broken windows and a partially collapsed roof. "Careful," the guard warned. "Floor's not stable in some sections. Place is scheduled for demolition next week." Jack entered first, flashlight illuminating the dusty interior. Ancient machinery cast strange shadows across the concrete floor, where years of neglect had created cracks and holes. Diesel moved cautiously, nose working the air. He paused near a large piece of equipment, looking upward. Jack followed his gaze to a series of rafters where Ember crouched, eyes reflecting the flashlight beam. "There she is," Jack whispered. "Elena, stay by the door. If she runs, guide her toward the truck." Elena nodded, positioning herself strategically. For nearly an hour, Jack worked patiently to coax Ember down, using techniques they developed during their months together. Diesel remained a calming presence, communicating in that mysterious way the two animals had developed. Finally, as dusk approached, Ember descended to a lower beam. Jack seized the opportunity, quickly throwing a specialized net he'd brought from the research facility. The light mesh settled over Ember, designed not to harm, but to temporarily restrict movement. Ember hissed, a sound of fear and betrayal that pierced Jack's heart. He worked quickly to secure her, murmuring reassurances that seemed hollow even to his own ears. "I'm sorry, girl," he told her, "but it's for your own safety." As they carried Ember to Jack's truck in a transport crate, Elena's phone rang. It was Townsend. "We've got her," Elena reported. "Heading back to the rehabilitation facility now." Jack drove in silence, the weight of Ember's captured presence in the back of his truck sitting heavily on his conscience. Diesel whined occasionally from the passenger seat, sensing the wrongness of their situation. "She came to town for a reason," Jack finally said. "She could have gone anywhere, deeper into the mountains, other wilderness areas. But she came to Pinetop." Elena looked thoughtful. "Familiarity, perhaps? She's observed us making trips to town. Or maybe she was following Diesel's scent trails from your previous visits. Or maybe," Jack said quietly, "she was looking for something she couldn't find in the wild." As they turned onto the forest road leading to Jack's property, Elena placed her hand over his on the gear shift. "Whatever her reasons, she's safe now. That's what matters." But Jack wasn't so certain. As he glanced in the rearview mirror at the crate containing the creature who had changed his life, he wondered if safety was truly what Ember needed, or if, in his desire to protect her, he was denying her the freedom to choose her own path. May brought warm days and cool nights to the Appalachians, painting the mountains in vibrant greens and splashes of wildflower color. Inside the newly constructed containment facility on Jack's property, Ember paced restlessly, her movements tracked by multiple cameras. 3 weeks of observation, and her behavior remains consistent, Dr. Chen reported, reviewing footage with Jack and Elena in the research station. "She displays clear predatory instincts but also shows signs of what we might call socialized behavior. She responds to specific human voices, particularly yours, Jack. And her interactions with Diesel through the barrier are extraordinary. The barrier was a section of reinforced fencing that allowed Ember and Diesel to see and smell each other without direct contact, a precaution insisted upon by fish and wildlife after the town incident. Is it enough to convince Wilcox? Jack asked. Chen sighed. The scientific data supports our case that Ember represents a unique behavioral study, not a public safety threat. But Director Wilcox is under pressure from multiple directions. Since Ember's appearance in Pinetop, the situation had grown increasingly political. Conservation groups demanded she be transferred to a wilderness rehabilitation center, arguing that Jack's facility was too accessible to humans. Meanwhile, tourism advocates, led by Mayor Peterson, pushed for controlled public access to what they called the Appalachian Bobcat experience. The university's position is clear, Chen continued. We want to maintain the research program here, with Ember as its centerpiece. But ultimately, Fish and Wildlife has final authority. Jack stared at the monitor showing Ember. She looked smaller somehow, confined in the spacious but unmistakably artificial environment. This isn't what I wanted for her. Elena placed a hand on his shoulder. I know, Jack. Their moment was interrupted by the arrival of Ranger Townsend, accompanied by a woman Jack recognized from local news reports, Catherine Lawson, the state's newly appointed wildlife conservation director. Mr. Harmon. Lawson greeted him with a brisk handshake. I've heard much about your unorthodox rehabilitation project. Not sure I'd call it unorthodox, Jack replied carefully. Just adapted to unique circumstances. Lawson smiled thinly. That's precisely what I'm here to evaluate. She turned to Chun. Doctor, I understand you've accumulated significant behavioral data. I'd like to review it personally. While Chun guided Lawson through the research findings, Townsend pulled Jack aside. She's here to make a final determination. Jack, the governor wants this situation resolved before tourist season peaks. And what does Mark Townsend want? Jack asked directly. The ranger's professional mask slipped momentarily. I want what's best for the Bobcat. I'm just not sure anymore what that is. The assessment continued through the afternoon, with Lawson observing Ember directly and questioning Jack about every aspect of her development. Elena provided detailed medical records, while Chin offered behavioral analyses. I'd like to see the interaction with the German Shepherd, Lawson finally requested. Jack led Diesel to the barrier section of the enclosure. The dog immediately went to the fence, tail wagging slightly as Ember approached from the other side. What followed was the familiar, silent communication that had fascinated researchers, subtle ear movements, body postures, and vocalizations barely audible to human ears. Remarkable, Lawson admitted. Dr. Chin's papers didn't fully capture the complexity of their relationship. Papers never do, Jack said simply. Later, as sunset painted the sky in vivid oranges and pinks, Lawson delivered her preliminary assessment on Jack's porch. Based on my observations, I'm prepared to authorize a modified continuation of the rehabilitation program. Hope flickered in Jack's chest. Modified how? The Bobcat will remain in the secure containment facility indefinitely, with controlled interaction sessions with the dog under supervision. Lawson consulted her tablet. We'll establish a technical advisory committee to oversee the program, including representatives from state agencies, conservation groups, and yes, she grimaced slightly, the local tourism board. Jack's hope collapsed into disappointment. So she stays in a cage for the rest of her life? A state-of-the-art habitat, Lawson corrected, with enrichment activities and environmental stimulation. But never free, Jack persisted. Never able to make her own choices. Lawson's expression hardened. Mr. Harmon, the Bobcat demonstrated habituation behaviors in town. That's a textbook indication that full release is no longer viable. The committee's charge will be to determine the best possible quality of life within necessary safety parameters. After Lawson and Townsend departed, Jack remained on the porch long into the evening, watching stars appear over the mountains. Elena joined him, bringing coffee laced with something stronger. I should never have caught her, Jack said after a long silence. Should have let her go when she ran. And if she'd been shot by someone who thought she was threatening their child, Elena countered gently. Or hit by a car? Or trapped by people looking to cash in on her fame. At least it would have been her choice, Jack said, the words heavy in his throat. Not a committee decision. Elena's hand found his. I know this isn't what you envisioned when you found her after the storm. I didn't envision any of this, Jack admitted. I just wanted to help a wounded animal. Then somehow she became family, Elena finished for him. They sat in companionable silence until Elena's phone chimed with a text message. She read it, her expression changing. "What is it?" Jack asked. "Dr. Chun. She says one of the research assistants noticed something on today's scans." Elena was already standing. Something about Ember's physiology. They hurried to the research station, where Chun waited with a young graduate student named Marcus. The facility was dimly lit, monitoring equipment casting a blue glow over their faces. "Show them," Chun instructed. Marcus pulled up a series of thermal images on the main screen. "We've been monitoring Ember's vital signs remotely. Her temperature has been elevated for several days, and there are hormonal indicators in the blood work from last week." He pointed to specific areas on the scan. Classic signs of estrus. "She's going into heat," Elena translated, glancing at Jack. "First time since she's been with us," Chun confirmed. "We expected it eventually, of course, but the timing is significant." Jack understood immediately. That's why she went to town. She was following instinct, looking for territory, possibly a mate. "Precisely," Chun nodded. "And it creates a new variable in our situation." Elena frowned. "How so?" "Director Lawson's plan assumes Ember's current behavioral patterns will remain stable," Chun explained. "But reproductive cycles can dramatically alter wild animal behavior. The data we've collected is suddenly incomplete." Jack leaned against a desk, mind racing. "So what happens now?" "Scientifically, we need to document how her first reproductive cycle affects her socialized behaviors," Chun said. "It could strengthen our case for a more naturally designed habitat. Or confirm Lawson's concerns about unpredictable behavior," Elena added. Jack stared at the monitor showing Ember's enclosure. The bobcat had abandoned her restless pacing and now sat alert, facing the forest beyond the facility's perimeter. "She wants out," Jack said simply. "Everything in her is telling her to claim territory, to find a mate, to be what nature intended." "Jack," Elena began, recognizing the shift in his expression. "This isn't right," he continued, voice growing firmer. "Committee meetings and research papers while she suffers in a glorified cage." Chun looked alarmed. "Whatever you're thinking, Jack, remember there are protocols, legal obligations. Your permit, my permit was for rehabilitation." Jack cut her off. "Not imprisonment." Later that night, after everyone had left, Jack sat alone in his cabin. Diesel lay at his feet, occasionally looking toward the door as if expecting Ember to appear. The research station was dark, monitored remotely from the university during night hours, a cost-saving measure Jack had initially protested but now appreciated. The security codes for Ember's enclosure were in Jack's safe, emergency access protocols required by fish and wildlife. Using them would trigger alerts, giving him perhaps 30 minutes before someone responded. Jack pulled out a map of the region, spread it across his kitchen table. He'd marked several remote areas during his ranger days, places rarely visited, with suitable habitat for bobcats and minimal human interference. Places Ember could truly be wild. The logical part of his mind enumerated the consequences: revocation of his permit, possible criminal charges, the end of the university partnership, and the loss of Ember forever. The emotional part, the part that had awakened when he found a wounded bobcat kitten in storm debris, whispered that some things mattered more than protocols and permits. The phone rang, startling him. Elena's name appeared on the screen. "I know what you're thinking," she said when he answered. "I can hear it in your silence all the way from town." Jack said nothing. "If you do this," Elena continued, "there's no going back. Everything you've built here, everything we've all worked for, it ends." "She deserves a chance," Jack finally replied. "A real chance, not a committee's version of one." The line went quiet for so long Jack thought Elena might have hung up. "Then, where would you take her?" Jack named a location deep in the national forest, a valley he'd discovered years ago, rich with game and natural shelter, far from hiking trails or campgrounds. "You'd need to disable the tracking implant," Elena said, her tone shifting from opposition to reluctant support. "Otherwise, they'd find her within days." "I know how," Jack admitted. "Field training from my ranger days. But I'd need supplies." Another long silence. "I'll bring them." 1 hour. Jack hung up, a wave of emotion tightening his throat. Rising from the table, he looked around the cabin that had been his solitary refuge for so long. now filled with evidence of connections he'd never intended to make. Ember's climbing shelves, Diesel's bed, Elena's coffee mug in the dish rack, research papers stacked neatly on the side table. Diesel followed as Jack moved methodically around the cabin, gathering essentials, his old field pack, maps, first aid supplies, the specialized handling equipment for Ember. The German Shepherd seemed to understand the gravity of the moment, staying close without getting in the way. "We're doing the right thing," Jack told him, kneeling to scratch behind the dog's ears. "Even if it doesn't feel like it tomorrow." Outside, the night was clear and cool, a bright half-moon illuminating the research facility where Ember waited, unaware that the next hours would determine the course of her life and irrevocably change the lives of those who had come to care for her. Dawn broke over the eastern ridge, bathing the mountains in soft golden light. Jack's truck bumped along a barely discernible Forest Service road, deeper into the wilderness than any tourist or casual hiker would venture. Beside him, Elena checked Ember's vitals through the small opening in the specialized transport crate. "Sedation's holding steady," she reported. "She'll start coming around in about an hour." In the back seat, Diesel sat alert, occasionally whining softly as if sensing the significance of their journey. The German Shepherd hadn't left Ember's side since they'd removed her from the containment facility hours earlier. The previous night had unfolded with military precision. Elena had arrived with medical supplies and a steely determination that surprised Jack. Together, they'd executed the plan, disabling security cameras with a temporary loop, entering the enclosure with sedatives, carefully administering them to Ember, and removing the tracking implant beneath her shoulder blade. "We should be clear of any cell service soon," Jack noted, checking the no-signal icon on his phone. "Makes it harder for them to track us." "You realize what this means for your career?" Elena asked quietly. "For everything you've built." Jack's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Some prices are worth paying." The truck rounded a curve, and Jack pulled to a stop at what appeared to be a dead end. Ahead, an overgrown trail disappeared into dense forest. "We go on foot from here," he said, checking his watch. 3 miles to the valley. They worked silently, transferring Ember to a lighter carrying sling and gathering essential supplies. Jack shouldered his pack, while Elena carried medical equipment. The morning air was crisp and sweet with pine, the forest peaceful except for birdsong and the occasional rustling of small animals in the underbrush. An hour into their hike, Ember began stirring in the sling. Jack and Elena paused, setting her down carefully on a bed of pine needles. Diesel stood guard nearby, unusually solemn. "She's waking up right on schedule," Elena murmured, checking Ember's pupils. "Vitals are strong." Jack knelt beside the bobcat who had changed everything in his life. "Almost there, girl. Almost free." They resumed their journey with Ember still partially sedated but now aware of her surroundings. The terrain grew steeper, requiring careful navigation through rocky outcroppings and dense rhododendron thickets. Jack led confidently, drawing on decades of experience in these mountains. "There," he finally said, pointing ahead to a clearing where the land opened into a sheltered valley. "That's the place." The valley was everything Jack had remembered, a pristine wilderness haven with a clear stream running through its center, rocky overhangs providing natural shelter, and dense forest offering prey and protection. Most importantly, it was remote enough that human interference was unlikely. They set Ember down in a sun-dappled clearing. The bobcat was fully awake now, amber eyes taking in her surroundings with increasing alertness. The effects of the sedative were fading, replaced by the natural wariness of a wild predator. "We need to move back," Elena advised. "Give her space to orient herself." Jack nodded, though the thought of retreat sent a pang through his chest. They withdrew to the edge of the clearing, Diesel reluctantly following after a quiet command from Jack. For long minutes, Ember remained still, assessing her new environment. Then, with the fluid grace that had always captivated Jack, she rose and took several tentative steps. Her movements grew more confident as she explored the clearing, sniffing at plants and soil, ears swiveling to capture every sound. "She seems to approve of your choice," Elena whispered, her hand finding Jack's. "Let's hope so," Jack replied, his voice rough with emotion. Ember approached the stream, drinking deeply before investigating the rocky outcropping nearby. When she disappeared into the underbrush, Jack felt a physical ache in his chest, as if something essential was being pulled away from him. "Should we go?" Elena asked gently. "Not yet," Jack said. "I need to be sure she's okay." They settled on a fallen log at the clearing's edge, maintaining their distance but unwilling to leave. Diesel lay at their feet, eyes fixed on the spot where Ember had vanished. As morning gave way to afternoon, they caught occasional glimpses of the bobcat exploring her new territory, sometimes near, sometimes distant, but always moving with increasing confidence. Jack meticulously noted landmarks and signs, his ranger training instinctively cataloging the details of healthy habitat. "Look there," Elena nudged him, pointing toward a rocky ledge above the stream. Ember had emerged, her spotted coat blending perfectly with the dappled sunlight as she surveyed the valley from her elevated position. "She's claiming it," Jack said, a mixture of pride and sadness coloring his words. "Making it hers." "You did the right thing, Jack," Elena assured him, though they both knew the consequences waiting back in the world beyond this valley would be severe. The sun was beginning its westward descent when Jack finally stood. "We should start back? It'll be dark soon." As they prepared to leave, Diesel suddenly tensed, giving a soft whine that Jack recognized immediately, the same sound the dog used to communicate with Ember. Jack turned to see the bobcat standing at the clearing's edge, amber eyes fixed on them. "She's saying goodbye," Elena whispered. Jack knelt, maintaining the respectful distance that acknowledged Ember's wild nature. "Be free," he told her simply. "Be what you were meant to be." For a breathtaking moment, Ember and Diesel locked gazes across the clearing, a silent exchange between species that science could observe but never fully explain. Then, with a flick of her tufted ears, Ember turned and disappeared into the forest, the light and shadow swallowing her perfectly camouflaged form. The hike back to the truck was conducted mostly in silence, each lost in their own thoughts about what they'd done and what awaited them. As they crested the final ridge, Jack's phone suddenly chimed with returning service. Notifications flooded the screen, missed calls from Townsend, Dr. Chun, and numerous unknown numbers. "Sooner than expected," Jack commented, showing Elena the screen. "Are you ready for this?" she asked. Jack gazed back toward the valley they'd left, where Ember now roamed free. "No," he admitted, "but I don't regret it." The reckoning came swiftly. By nightfall, when they returned to Jack's property, vehicles lined the driveway. Fish and wildlife, university security, even local police. Townsend met them at the cabin door, his expression a complex mixture of anger and something resembling respect. "You've created quite a situation, Jack," the ranger said. "Director Wilcox is pushing for criminal charges. The university's legal team is in full damage control mode." Jack nodded, accepting the consequences. "I did what I believed was right." "And where is the bobcat now?" Townsend asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "Where she belongs," Jack replied simply. "That's all I'm going to say." The following weeks passed in a blur of legal meetings, official reprimands, and the dismantling of everything Jack had built over the past year. His rehabilitation permit was revoked. The university partnership was terminated, though Dr. Chin assured him privately that the data already collected would advance scientific understanding of interspecies bonding for years to come. Most painful was the transformation of his property, once a sanctuary, now stripped of its specialized equipment and monitoring systems, returning to the simple cabin it had been before Ember entered his life. Through it all, Elena remained steadfast, her veterinary practice suffering its own consequences for her role in Ember's release, but her conviction never wavering. "No regrets?" she asked one evening as they sat on Jack's porch, watching fireflies rise from the summer grass. "Only that you got caught in the fallout," Jack replied, his hand finding hers. "I made my choice," Elena said. "Just like you did. Just like Ember did." Diesel, lying nearby, suddenly lifted his head, ears alert toward the forest edge. For a heartbeat, Jack felt a wild hope surge through him, but the tree line remained still, revealing nothing. "Do you think we'll ever see her again?" Elena asked softly. Jack shook his head. "Probably not. And that's as it should be." He gazed toward the mountains, painted purple in the fading light. "But I like knowing she's out there, living the life she was meant for." Summer turned to fall, and fall to winter. Jack's legal troubles eventually resolved with hefty fines but no criminal record, thanks partly to public opinion that had shifted surprisingly in his favor after the story spread. Elena's practice slowly rebuilt its client base, and their relationship deepened into something neither had expected to find at this stage of life. Diesel, now 3 years old, adapted to life without his bobcat companion, though sometimes he would stand at the forest edge, nose to the wind, as if searching for a familiar scent. It was during the winter festival, ironically enough, that the miracle occurred. Jack and Elena had reluctantly attended at Mayor Peterson's insistence, a gesture of community reconciliation after months of tension. As they walked back to their car through freshly fallen snow, Diesel suddenly froze, then bolted toward the darkened town park. "Diesel," Jack called, following quickly. The German Shepherd stopped beneath an old oak tree, looking upward with intense focus. Jack approached cautiously, following the dog's gaze. There, perched on a low branch, was a bobcat, larger than Ember had been when they released her, her winter coat thick and healthy. The notch in her left ear was unmistakable. "Elena," Jack breathed, barely daring to move. Elena joined him, gasping softly when she spotted the bobcat. "Is it really her?" As if in answer, Ember, for it could be no other, made a soft chirruping sound that Jack had heard countless times during their months together. Diesel responded with his familiar whine, the communication between them apparently unbroken by months of separation. For several precious minutes, they stood in silent communion, the man, the woman, the dog, and the wild creature who had bound their lives together. Then, with a final lingering look, Ember disappeared into the darkness beyond the park. "She came back," Elena whispered, tears freezing on her cheeks in the winter air. "She came to visit," Jack corrected gently. "But she's wild now, free to choose her path." As they walked home through the quiet streets of Pinetop, snow falling gently around them, Jack felt a peace he hadn't known in years. Ember was thriving in the wilderness where she belonged, yet she remembered the bond they'd formed, strong enough to bring her back, if only for a moment of connection. "Some things," he told Elena as they reached his truck, Diesel between them, "are meant to change us and then set us free." Elena smiled, understanding the truth that their unlikely family had taught them all, that the greatest act of love is sometimes letting go, and that connections once formed can span the divide between wild and tame, between human and animal, between solitude and belonging. Somewhere in the darkness beyond town, a bobcat moved silently through the winter forest, wild and free, yet carrying the imprint of the humans and the dog who had saved her, raised her, and ultimately given her the greatest gift of all, the choice to be exactly who she was meant to be. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and if you've watched this far, comment, "I watched until here," and share your opinion about this story. Oh, and don't forget to watch the next video that appears on the end screen. It's very exciting.